Okay. There you go.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to Reviewing Classroom Strategies for Student Engagement. I'm so happy that you've taken the time here to join us here in the Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning at Eastern Kentucky University. We're here on a beautiful Friday morning here on campus. I'm looking out the window here. Wherever you're joining us through Zoom or wherever you're watching this, hope that you're getting ready to enjoy your day and hope that it's a beautiful day where you're at too. So this is this presentation here. First, I'm going to go over here just a reference here of what this presentation is based on. I'll certainly be sharing some of my own teaching experiences in the courses that I teach. But the presentation, the full reference here, is from chapter 5 of a textbook by Robert Marzano. So you can see the text there. The complete reference there is The Art and Science of Teaching, a Comprehensive Framework for Effective Instruction. So this is a summary of their chapter 5. You see pages 98 to 116, the 2007 version. And so all the references that are in the presentation are as cited in this chapter. So at the end of the presentation too, happy to share the reference list, and those complete references will be posted too in the final version of the presentation. So feel free to email myself or Cassie Bradley too. We'll be happy to get those to you, and they'll be uploaded. Also during the presentation too, if you have any questions, there we go. If you have any questions or comments, there we go. Please feel free to come off mute, to unmute yourself or to send a message in the chat feature. Thank you to Cassie Bradley here for being able to monitor the chat. So just know that too, and that she'll be monitoring that, and I'll try my best here to respond to your comment, or if it's a question, I'll try my best to answer it. So just please feel free to do that during the presentation too. So again, I'm so happy that you've joined us here today, and just about me, because I think that's important too, to share about my worldview on how I see things and who I am. So I'm a licensed speech language pathologist in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So that informs my teaching too. So my clinical work as a speech language pathologist. I'm a clinical supervisor in the Eastern Kentucky University Speech Language Hearing Clinic. So my clinical work and my clinical supervision informs what I do as a teacher as well. So I'm a board certified specialist in stuttering, cluttering, and fluency. So the assessment and treatment of stuttering is something that's part of the scope of practice of a speech language pathologist. And so that's what I specialize in clinically in the discipline of speech language pathology. You may have noticed too, perhaps, maybe not, but I'm also someone who stutters too. So you'll hear me stutter throughout the presentation. So just to share that with all of you. I am an assistant professor. I'm in the Department of Clinical Therapeutic Programs at EKU. I teach a variety of courses that are in the Communication Sciences and Disorders program at the undergraduate and the graduate level. I am, as part of my role as a full-time faculty member, I am an academic advisor too, that's in our Communication Sciences and Disorders program. I have the honor of being the faculty innovator representing the College of Education and Applied Human Sciences. And kind of funny to put this at the bottom there, that last one. I'm a human being. So I would imagine you and I have many things in common, just being humans together. I'd imagine too that you and I share many thoughts and feelings as human beings, but also as people who share an interest in learning about teaching and that have a passion for teaching. So thank you all for being here today and for your commitment to your continuing education in learning about teaching. So at the beginning here, the idea about engagement, right? Because this presentation is all about like strategies to try to promote, to create an environment where students will be engaged in the classroom. So Marzano mentions here at the beginning, it's not necessarily our job to be an entertainer. Certainly that's kind of part of teaching a little bit, but we're not really entertaining. We certainly want to try to facilitate an environment where students will be engaged. And as instructors, I agree is that we do need to engage students within the classroom. And so we'll talk about that, like, okay, what is engagement? What exactly does that mean? So engaging students, it can be challenging. It can be challenging to engage students within the classroom. So I think that's important just to acknowledge that, just to kind of get that out there, is that this is hard. It's hard. I think especially too, as mentioned by Marzano, that our technology is constantly evolving. We think about social media, we think about, right, the internet's just part of our life now. And so I think with technology and how rapidly the rate in which technology is developing, it's challenging to engage students to try to keep up on the most current software platform, the most current app, whatever it is, fill in the blank, right? So I think that's just important just to get that out there about how do we engage students, right? We may not necessarily be entertaining. There may be some elements of that, but also engagement. So what exactly is engagement? Marzano gives through, there's many definitions of engagement. So Bloom, talks about engagement as being participation, right? You're participating. Fredericks, Blumenfeld, and Paris talk about, well, there's different kinds of engagement. We can engage people on a cognitive level, so that idea about thinking. We can engage them on an emotional level, so this idea of related to like experiential learning, like trying to really engage and to experience the course content. And then how do you feel as you're engaging in the course content on an emotional level? And then there's the behavioral. So behaviors are actions, right? They're like things that you do. And so the focus of this talk, just like in the chapter that we're summarizing here, is related to behavior, like things that we can have students do, like action-oriented types of things within the classroom. Certainly how people think and feel about things, that's part of it too. And that may evolve and come out of behaviors that we have students do within the classroom, and it's all good, right? So they suggest Marzano suggests different action steps related to thinking about this idea of engagement related to behaviors, like something that I want the student to do, to participate in. So we're going to go through some of those action steps. And I'd like for you to think about two ways that you've done this in your own classroom. And at the end, we will budget time, for questions, for us to talk about this. Just knowing that this presentation will also be uploaded and made available, to you on the website. But first step here too is games. So games that are related to content. These are, games where we can identify a question. We can do like naming categories, model games after television style game shows. So, these could be anything like Marzano mentions about like the game show Jeopardy or like Family Feud. So kind of modeling or even finding like television style game shows, maybe that obviously maybe aren't on TV anymore, but trying to model these games after those. So team-based games can be very helpful too. Saying as many words related to response as you can think of in a certain amount of time. And there may be like a competition element to these games, or there doesn't have to be either. As in the next slide, 2, we'll talk about just games for the spirit of having fun, right? There's not necessarily a winner. We're not doing competition. We can randomly assign students together in groups. Certainly if we're wanting students to engage with other people within the classroom. And we might want to switch those groups periodically. You can see in the picture there are different cards. A deck of cards goes a long way. You know, we could hand out a deck of cards to students. We could say, okay, everybody that has, you know, a certain suit, like everyone that has hearts, you know, whatever it might be, you know, from, you know, the 2 card up to the 10 card, you're going to be in one group, all the diamonds together, you know. And so there's different ways that we can get students in different groups as well. And again, games are just played for the fun of it. So that's just one way to get students that idea about games, right? You could do a competition, you could not do one. So also another action step that's related to this is trying to manage how to respond to questions within the classroom setting. So that's engagement too. Stahl talks about this idea and kind of breaks down different ways of responding to questions within the classroom. And as instructors, I know we've all been there sometimes where we need to practice some wait time. So we'll talk about post-teacher question, right? Within a student response, a post-student response, and then where we may pause ourselves, and then like an impact pause. And so we're really exploring and experimenting with pausing. So I shared with you before at the beginning, you know, my worldview. I'm a speech language pathologist. I specialize in stuttering and speech fluency, so the forward flow of speech. So this is an area that I can really appreciate a lot. And I would encourage you to experiment with pausing in your own teaching. There are many benefits, potential benefits of pausing in class. So wait time. So there's a post-teacher question, right? We may have all done this where we've had a question that we've posted to the group, and we're asking the group to reflect on this in some way, right? So I might say, for example, in my classes, I might say, you know, we've learned a lot about stuttering. You know, we learned about just some facts about stuttering, and, you know, we've distinguished between myths about it and facts. You know, what do you think causes stuttering? And then we're waiting. And what Stahl mentions is, how long do we wait? And so they mentioned anywhere from 0.7 to 1.4 seconds before someone responds. And to me, that doesn't seem very long. You know, I wear a watch. And so if I'm looking at my second hand, a second is like just that from now to then. And I would encourage you even to wait longer. But, you know, thinking about that, we want to wait at least for 1.4 seconds before people respond, because as we're going to talk about later, you know, students need time to process and to reflect. So a within student pause, this is, a within student pause is when a student begins to answer a question. This could be in like a large group setting or a small group where we're going around to the groups and checking in. So we go back to the example. If I might pose the question to everybody, you know, like, what causes stuttering? Like, what theory or model for you best explains what causes stuttering? And the student may raise their hand and they're beginning to talk about it. And as they're talking, right, it's natural for us to pause as we're thinking about things, right? They say, well, I think stuttering is caused by multiple factors. And, you know, those factors are, and just how I'm pausing right now. What's interesting is pauses that are shorter than 0.5 seconds. What Stahl meant is that instructors sometimes have the tendency maybe to interject or to interrupt the student as the student's like formulating what it is that they want to say. And so I would encourage you to avoid interrupting students as they're thinking. And so we need to make sure, right, to practice that silence and to allow students to process. They might say, yeah, I think stuttering is caused by lots of different factors. Some of those factors might be, as they're going on, right, that there's a genetic component to stuttering. There are environmental factors, and yeah, response is, yeah, that's right. Yeah, what does everybody else think about that, right? So the post student, that's kind of what we're getting at here. Post student is we might wait a few seconds, at least after the student has responded. All right, so the post teacher question is, I said, hey, what causes stuttering? What does everybody think? I really need to wait. Some students might respond in the large group setting, in the within student pause, right? We're letting them complete what they want to say. After the student said that, yeah, it's caused by lots of factors. I'd say, yeah. And then we're waiting in that post-student response, right? What does everybody else think? I wonder what everybody else is thinking right now, right? Wait, right? Wait at least a few seconds, if not more. And then the teacher pause is students need time to process new information that we are presenting. And so we all do this in our own instruction, but maybe this is a way, just as I'm talking about it, maybe it's something different, maybe a new way of talking about it, is that we want to practice pausing between like new items that we are presenting. So I might say, yes, stuttering is caused by lots of different factors, isn't it? There's the genetic component to stuttering, right? We know that stuttering can run in families. We know too that there are some predisposing factors to stutter. I'm pausing, right? We're allowing the silence. We're trying to hold that pause. We're trying to hold this, like create a space for that pause for students to really kind of reflect on it. Yeah, we know there are environmental factors that contribute to stuttering. So I'd encourage you to try to have some fun with pausing. That might kind of sound different to say, but have some fun with it. Kind of explore it and experiment with that. Yeah. And then there's the impact pause. So it helps to focus attention too. We might make a big point, where we really want to say something, right? Something that's a very big point about this, right? Yeah, we know we might talk about like a big myth about stuttering, let me say, some people think that stuttering is caused by being nervous. For individuals who stutter, right, you might say, we know that that's not true. Like anxiety is not the main cause of stuttering. Anxiety in itself doesn't cause somebody to stutter, Certainly anxiety might exacerbate stuttering sometimes. But some of you might have thought that, and you know what, that's okay. But anxiety doesn't cause stuttering. Impact pause, right? Just to kind of think about that, right? Yeah, understandable why people might think that, but that's not the case. Yeah. And so we talk about the nuances of that in class about anxiety and stuttering. So I'd encourage you to experiment with pausing. Another way is managing how to respond to questions. Two is through the use of response cards. I'd imagine all of us do this in some way within class. So again, this may just be a different way of talking about it. But we can, obviously, there are many like free like third-party websites that are out there that allow students to respond to questions in an anonymous manner, so where they might have clickers, or there's an app that they can download, or something. They can go to a website. They can provide like a survey type response to a question. So certainly that's one way to engage students too. A low technology response too. It's interesting, the other day on campus, I'm not so sure what date this was, but the internet went out on campus. There was a couple of times this happened. And I remember I was just getting ready to teach class, and I was like, the internet's out. I was like, but I was getting ready, and the internet came back on before class started. I mean, this is like interesting. We're talking about this, right? Like, but the internet came back on But before class, I was like, it's an in-person class, everyone's coming, like, what am I gonna, I can't go to the internet, so I found just some index cards. I was getting pieces of paper, just like low tech stuff. And I was like, we're just gonna do this, we're just gonna, I'll have my laptop out and, we'll just kind of do our best. But certainly index cards are very helpful too. I have whole stacks of index cards in my office. And right, I might pass out the cards to students in class and say, what's a question that you have right now about the content? I'll collect the cards. Of course, in like full disclosure, I'll share to the students, hey, please don't put your name on it, if you don't want to. Just know what I'm going to do with the cards. I'm going to shuffle them and I'll pick out a card and I'll read out your question and like we'll talk about it. At the end of class too, like the idea of like an exit slip, this could be thought of that too. Saying, hey, I'm going to pass out these cards today. I'd like for you just to think about what's one thing that you learned today, maybe that you didn't, that you didn't really know before, or you're thinking about it differently. And then what's one thing that's a little bit more unclear to you, like something that we could spend some more time on that you have like a question about. And it's a voluntary thing. I say, you don't have to put your name on it, and so I'll collect the cards at the end of class and I'll go through them. And so it's a great way for student feedback too about your teaching as well. Because I don't know about all of you, sometimes I'll be teaching a concept and I'll go, oh, I went over that really well. Like I don't need to go over that again. And then I get back the feedback and I go, oh, wait a minute, I kind of missed the point here. I should have spent more time on this. So that's one way as engagement that we're listening to students too. So another way about managing how to respond to questions here is the choral response, or one way too for student engagement is to have students respond in unison together. So obviously this is something where we may not do this all of the time, and I know in the literature there's kind of mixed findings about this. But for choral response, kind of some things to keep in mind about it is it's best with like a short phrase or a sentence. So it's used when there's difficult information, maybe to understand or to process. If there's like we all have our own technical language that we use in our discipline. And so everyone says this information together, I'll share with you, like in my area in stuttering, we talk about, okay, like we talk about disfluencies, and then we say, disfluencies, like what are considered like stuttering disfluencies? And so it's different language. We use like kind of clinical terminology to describe the types of interruptions that people have. And we say, disfluencies are monosyllabic, whole word repetition. So these are stuttering disfluencies. Monosyllabic whole word repetition, right? Not a word you say every day. If you're say part word repetition, sound prolongation, and a block, right? And so I sometimes have my students say that in class. Like I'll say, yeah, let's say that, stuttering disfluencies. And by the way, just stuttering is very unique for everybody. So I'm just speaking in general here. But we say it together. Okay, monosyllabic, whole repetitions, part word repetitions, sound prolongations, blocks. And we all say that together, right? And so that's that unison, like we're saying it together, we're trying to understand it. I'm engaging with the material in a different way, like an auditory way. I'm saying it with other people, like, okay, I'm kind of getting this now. I'm even getting used to saying that word, like monosyllabic, a one syllable word, I, so. Right. Obviously not something to use all the time, right? But there might be something where there's a difficult information or something as an instructor where you're like, whatever it might be on this assignment, this exam. I noticed, to yourself, you might say, I noticed a lot of people kind of miss this, this point that I was trying to make. So let's all say this together. There might be like, 3 terms that are related to this, this idea. So let's all say this together. So it might be something that you want to revisit in class also. So another way to engage students is by movement. So movement. So Marzano goes through and reviews different ways of movement. You know, I don't know about all of you. So I teach, the majority of the classes that I teach are an hour and 15 minutes long. I know there's different time frames. You know, I teach like for 50 minutes, 3 times a week, or some classes are like 3 hours. Some of you may teach online. That's a long time. That's a long time to sit. And so simply getting up and stretching, you know, in class, or just standing up in class. This could be at times, right, where you use your best judgment as the instructor, but it might be a time when you notice that students are just feeling tired, you know, or they're just seeing like, wow, it just seems like, you know, like the vibe of the room, like I'm just looking around, like everyone just seems tired, you know? And so my impression is, right, that we might just need to get up and stretch, right? So I say, right, I'm not like an expert in stretching or anything like, you know, like I don't, like you just get up and if you want to stretch, like however you feel comfortable stretching, please feel free to do that, right? And it's just a minute, you know, it's just a minute. So we may have students do that as a way to engage, right? To kind of come back, right? We could do things like a representation of like body movements. So the next piece there, we can make like physical movements that are associated with concepts that are in a class. So one, like in my field, so we talk about normal anatomy, the part, and the physiology, how it works together, how the anatomy works together. Anatomy and physiology of the speech mechanism. And so the vocal folds are part of those. So the vocal cords, the vocal folds. And so an example of this in my discipline that I've used, and I need to give credit to Dr. Ron Scher at Bowling Green State University for this example. This is where I learned it from. But when we talk about the vocal fold movement, we talk about the vocal folds, the opening and closing of them. We talk about that the vocal folds open, you know, from the bottom, and then they close from the bottom. So it goes from the bottom up. It might be something where students are like, okay, I get that. I can, you know, write that down on an exam or explain that or say it out loud. But it's kind of a concept that's a little bit different to think about. And so Dr. Ron Scher, I learned this from him. It's almost kind of like a dance. I don't know if y'all can see me here, but right, like just an example of what this is. Maybe some of you are thinking about things in your own discipline, right? Like if these are, so we have 2 vocal folds. So these are like 2 vocal folds here. And the vocal folds come together, right? And so I say the vocal folds open as air is coming up, right, from our lungs, right? It's traveling up. And they open, the vocal folds open from the bottom. And so I'd say, this is, your hands represent the vocal folds coming together. This is like the view of the vocal folds from like the side, right? Or excuse me, from the back. And so we say they open from the bottom, and then they also close from the bottom too. So they come down like this. And so this is like how the vocal folds open and close. We say, okay, they open from the bottom, they open like this, and then they close again like this. So you say, this is like the movement of the vocal folds. And we have some fun, and like Dr. Scher, when I learned it from him, he says, this is like the vocal fold dance, right? This is like a vocal fold dance. So we have the whole class get up, and they're like doing this, and they're like, oh, I get it now. Okay, yeah, bottom, okay, got it, right? And so in your own discipline, whatever it might be, Marzano mentioned something about like mathematics or learning about math concepts or like physics or chemistry, whatever it is, you know, think about how you can be creative and develop like a body movement or something to explain a concept. So we're just kind of tapping into like another sense, right? We said before, like choral response is like auditory, right? I'm saying this together with somebody else, right? Body movement, right? I'm experiencing it with a body movement, okay? So just another way to do that. Marzano mentions this idea about give one, get one. And so this is where we're checking in with another student in class. It's kind of like similar to the frequently used like pair share, like think, pair, share types of things that we might have students do, or like we think about an idea and we say, okay, find somebody and share together. Okay, and then let's come back. It's kind of the same idea where we ask students to check in with one another. And a student might say, okay, how did you understand? We might say something like, oh, we learned about different approaches to stuttering treatment. During this section of class, I want you to go to somebody in class and compare notes. Like, what did you take away from this? How did the other person make a note on this? And then you take something from your partner, right? Okay, that was really interesting. You thought about it this way. I'm going to record that. And here, I'm going to give you kind of my perception too. This is what I got from it. And then you can come back as a larger group and share. You can say, okay, what did you give to somebody else, of how you took the note? And then what did you get from somebody else, right? Like the receiving. So it's just kind of like another way, right, to kind of structure it. We can also do like voting in class, like with movement. So this idea about physical movement. So we provide an answer to a question. And students move to different parts of the room for their response. We could do this with anything. It could be something about, like at the beginning, in my classes, I might say, we learned about theories and models of stuttering. Here's one theory about stuttering. How many of you agree with this theory? Hey, go on over to the right side of the room, for all of you that think this. For those of you that disagree with this, go to the other side of the room. For those of you that are like, I'm not sure, I need more info, you go right in the middle, right? And I mean, you could fill in the blank with anything and come up with different types of responses or Likert statements or whatever, and say, we're just going to go to different sides of the room. And that's physical movement. Students are engaged by doing something, they're kind of moving around. So just another idea. Thought maybe I'd check in with Cassie, see if anyone put anything in the chat or anything.
Not yet. I think everyone
right.
is listening and taking everything in.
All right, thanks. Right, so the next step we'll talk about here is pacing. So Marzano talks about the idea that instruction occurs in segments in a way. If you think about like segments like a story, right? Or if you think about it like like your favorite movie or a book or something like that, we should try our best to be telling a story in a way during classes, that like we teach. And that's just one way to think about it. But classes, typically have a flow to them, right? And everybody's different, but there may be at the beginning some administrative tasks, that we're doing. Not always, right? But we might say like, hey, how is everybody doing today? What's going on? Last time that we met together, might do a summary. We were talking about theories about stuttering. Today we're gonna get ready to talk about treatment of stuttering. Yeah, I know all of you, submitted your assignments last night, for this reflection paper. I'm looking forward to reviewing them and, seeing what like you thought about this. And then we typically will present some kind of content or reflect on content or ideas related to what's on our course schedule for that day. And we just logically think about what happens after that, right? It makes sense that we have like a theme for like the day, and that we're pacing. Students are engaged in pacing too. If something makes sense, if it kind of flows. And then we do activities that would allow students to engage with course content with those higher levels of learning, like in Bloom's taxonomy, right? Applying it, creating something, right? And enthusiasm. So another way to engage, just a strategy about student engagement, is enthusiasm. So enthusiasm, we don't want to necessarily, enthusiasm is great, but the effect might get diminished if we're constantly excited and enthusiastic like 100% of the time. But don't get me wrong. I think it's very important that you are enthusiastic about your topics because there's a real energy in that, right? It's like that it's like that common idea, like if you're not excited about it, like no, chances are other people may not be as excited. That's not always the case. But the idea about enthusiasm it can look a lot of different ways how people are enthusiastic about it. Certainly, it could be like an energy that someone's bringing to like the discussion, but it's also having like additional stories, like just from like your personal life, whatever you feel comfortable disclosing. Could be stories related to teaching the content, real life examples, any kind of supplemental knowledge. Obviously, along with what's available in the class, like from the text or the videos or whatever, that the labs, whatever you're doing. But it's the idea that you're bringing a lot more to the topic than just the text. So really, don't underestimate the power of enthusiasm, within your topic. So that's another way of getting students engaged also. So another way of engagement kind of went along with the first couple points that we talked about, was the idea of games, playing games. You could do a game as a competition. You do a game just for the fun of it. I tend to do games just for the fun of it. Sometimes when I do competition games, sometimes, yeah, people might get a little bit too competitive. But certainly that's not always the case. But another way of engaging is doing friendly controversy. So that's the keyword, friendly. So having students engage like in a friendly debate. And so Marzano summarizes this information here about like the idea of having students choose sides to like an issue, or to write like a theory or a model or like a way of doing something, whatever it is. We might say, what, we've learned about different ways of treating stuttering. And we might say, I'm just coming like treatment approach A, for stuttering. I'm going to have like, we could just create this. I'm going to have, half the class, I'm assigning that to you, right? We might say, even if you don't agree with it, that's okay, right? Like we're just here to try to take that other position, right? And so there's like a really interesting, I mean, you really kind of delve into the topic, right? Even if you don't agree with it, you're like, well, what if you could put yourself into the shoes of someone that does? Like it's that idea of like empathetic, kind of like, oh yeah, like Gerard Egan mentions this idea of empathetic understanding, right? Like you're right, like I could see how someone might think this, right? But we have students choose sides, right? Like all of you are assigned a treatment approach A. Your job's trying to come up with the best argument, or the evidence, that might be a better word, the best evidence for this. Like what supports this thinking? And then treatment approach B, all of you are on treatment approach B, this side of the class. And then you might have another group of students who get to decide which side that they want to be on. Kind of almost like a simulated courtroom. Like, okay, each side's going to present their evidence, and then in the middle, we're going to have people decide who presented the best evidence for this point. And then you could just see logically where that goes from, like, yeah, we could have a class discussion about this. Okay, what was challenging for treatment approach A? Like everybody over here, what was challenging about presenting this point? Some people might say, I didn't really agree with it, like based on my experience. Or it's like, yeah, I can see that. Same thing for treatment approach B. Like what made you, for people who decided both sides, what made you decide that? Or you can just kind of see where this logically can kind of go. So that's another way of engaging students also, is friendly controversy. So another way of engaging students is creating an activity where students can share themselves, that they can do a self-disclosure, right? They're sharing themselves related to like the course content. And as Marzano mentions here too, I said before, right, my about me slide, I'm a human being, so I bet we have a lot in common, right? We as human beings, we enjoy sharing ourselves. We enjoy talking about what we have an interest in, right? Like I like talking about myself, and I also enjoy learning about other people too. I enjoy learning about, other humans. And so, right, we kind of have that inside of us, don't we? Like to just, yeah, like I want to connect. Like I want I want to learn about you. I want to share myself too. And that's all part of getting to know our students too within the classroom and applying course content to their lives, right? So we allow students to apply what we're learning to their own life and share that in class. So Marzano mentioned some things in the text about, I forgot the specific examples that they give, but this is adapted from that in my own life. You might say, yeah, like in stuttering therapy, right? We might have some people might want to use strategies, and so we kind of talk about those strategies, and we talk about this idea like, yeah, it's kind of like warming up, like we might have somebody do something, or with their voice or something. A common recommendation might be that we have somebody do some kind of an exercise, like to warm up or to practice kind of maybe a different way of talking by like themselves, or whatever it is, like reading aloud by themselves at home or something. And so where I'm going with this, might be like, where are you going with this? So where I'm going with this is the idea of like warming up, right? The idea of like practicing. You might say, yeah, in speech therapy or anything, we sometimes will have people, practice things on their own, or like warming up, getting ready for something. And so I might say, okay, in your life, what are some things that you've had to practice? What are some things, right? I'm trying to do like the impact pause here. What are some things that you had to do in your life to practice? And so students then have that opportunity to share about themselves, and they might say, oh yeah, I played the clarinet, when I was in school, and yeah, I had to practice scales on the clarinet, or I played the flute, and yeah, like I remember doing these practicing by myself. Or some people it could be sports, might say, oh yeah, when I was on the basketball team, yeah, I had to do free throws, and I was just practicing that over and over and over again, to get ready for game time. And so you learn about students. And I say, well, I didn't know that you were on the basketball team in high school. Wow, that's really cool. Or wow, I didn't know that. Oh, you played the clarinet too. Same with me. I actually played the clarinet when I was in school, when I was in middle school. So it's like these things organically happen where you're like, oh wow, and then you apply it to your life. Yeah, like warming up, doing the scales on the clarinet when you're getting ready for band. It's the same concept as like why we would have someone practice. And so then people, you'll allow students to find meaning in that content. Might say, oh yeah, like that, I can see that. Yeah, why we would have somebody practice. Yeah, I practice in my own life. So it serves multiple purposes. So the idea is to try to find that general idea that you're talking about, like, and try to focus on that concept like broadly. So the last point here about an action step for student engagement is to provide like unusual types of information. And so this is something that, if the word unusual works for you, great. It could be like different, maybe like not expected. And it is related to the concepts that you're talking about. It's where it might come in the form of like a fun fact. It could be something about even like a trivia question. So I learned this from Dr. Alex Goberman at Bowling Green State University too, about trivia questions. And sometimes in my classes, I have started off with trivia questions, or I'll embed different trivia questions. And I'm just I'll stick with talking about stuttering. That's my example here about teaching about that. And so, right, we're learning about stuttering. I might say, okay, here's a trivia question. Of these 4 people that are listed up here, which famous person or celebrity is someone who stutters, right? And so we might be talking about like theories about stuttering, but it's related to stuttering. Right? So students are like, oh, I didn't know that person stuttered. I vote this, I vote B, I vote C. And so we try to make connections between the content and the people behind the content too. So it allows for this attention shift, like this engagement shift, right? From looking at my laptop on Blackboard, I'm doing this, and then all of a sudden there's something unusual that happens, right? Something different. So it could be something like in my field in speech language pathology is like a discipline. It came out of the University of Iowa in Iowa City. So I've never been to Iowa City, Iowa, but when we talk about like the history of speech language pathology, I might say, hey, check it out. We're gonna pull up Google Maps, like let's look like where is Iowa City, Iowa? So we look at the map, we'll look at say like, oh yeah, look at that. Oh yeah, look, they have interstate, whatever number that is, oh, that's interstate so-and-so. How far is Iowa City from Richmond, Kentucky? And you might even go like, oh, hey, somebody here, look it up, right? Like a lot of people have their laptops open. What's the quickest driving directions there? I mean, you can see it's at times it can be a little silly, right? But it's a way to engage, right? It's a way to make it meaningful. Like, hey, there's like people behind this, we talk about in our discipline, like the first person to graduate with a doctorate in speech language pathology is someone named Lee Edward Travis. And so we talk about that idea, like, okay, he was was at the University of Iowa. Let's look up things about University of Iowa, or like Iowa City. Oh, what about his life? You might try to find a fun fact about his life or something. Like, could be anything, like what's something about his life or a fun fact about that? Or like, let's go to a tourism website about Iowa City. Like, what's the top 10 things that people like to do in Iowa City? And so students are like, oh yeah, there's like this. These are like real people. This is like a real place. It's not like something off in the distance or abstract or Sorry, it allows for that a attention shift. So David Luderman wrote an extremely influential text in the field of communication sciences and disorders. Dr. Luderman is an audiologist, and he talked about the idea of counseling within the scope of practice of speech language pathology and in audiology. And he summarizes and talks about different types of silence. And I think that that's really important as we talk about engagement and pausing and wait time and like pacing within the classroom. And he talks about these different types of silence in a therapeutic context within our scope of practice. And I could see these being applied to teaching as well. So he talks about in silence, right? There's very deep processing that occurs in silence as like human beings. And he talks about, well, there's different kinds of silence. And as we're teaching, sometimes you might experience something like the embarrassed silence. And we might have all been there before where we've like posed a question to the class and like nobody's answering the question. And so, sometimes, right, it's normal for people to feel awkward, and maybe even, I don't want to assume, right, but like people may feel embarrassed, like, oh, like who's like going to answer that question? Or like people might laugh, I mean, very normal, like a very normal human reaction to have, like no one's answering, like, what's going to happen? But we're also kind of establishing some norms within the classroom to say like, yes, silence is okay. Like I can wait, all of you might be thinking, that's okay. The next type of silence is that reflective silence. And that's that idea of as time goes on, maybe within a classroom, the embarrassed silence might go away, right? Where students may not feel as awkward as the class goes on. Because they say, oh yeah, this is normal, right? It's normal for us to be in silence, for people to process. I also understand that if I'm not participating or if I don't say anything, like nothing's going to happen. Like the class won't move forward. So it's that reflective silence where people do that deep processing of course content. And then the termination silence, kind of a different phrase, but the termination silence is that idea, and I always get these confused sometimes when I'm teaching. And maybe all of you are with me here on this. But the termination silence is where somebody is basically, they might be feeling tired, right? They might be feeling like, this has been so much information. I need time to process this and really like think about what I'm thinking about all of this. This information might have stirred up some things for me, right, on a cognitive, emotional level, whatever it is. I need time to process this. Or someone might be like, what, it's time for, it's time for lunch. Like I'm hungry. It's an hour and 15-minute class. We're at an hour and 13 minutes. I'm kind of done, Like, and so as instructors, it's important for us to know that, because sometimes I think sometimes that students are in reflective silence. Like, I'm like, oh, I've posed this great question, and all of you are quiet because you're thinking about this, right? Yeah, no, like, it's kind of like, oh, wait a minute. Oh yeah, it is 12:30. Come to think of it, I'm hungry too, right? I'm not taking it personal, and so it's important to clarify the silence. I might say, oh, are all of you thinking about this, or are we feeling a little bit tired right now? Right? There's no judgment. I'm just like, are we feeling tired? Yeah. Okay. Fair. Right? That's fair. Yeah. So it's just important for us to understand the differences there, between the different types. And again, this may be some things that you've already known about, but maybe just presented in a different way. I want to budget some times for questions. I've kind of included in this slide like my own experiences with teaching and engagement, just to give you some examples, but I feel like I've done a lot of talking. So I'd like to budget some time too for just any comments, really. I understand all of us, they're listening in. I mean, we have lots of experiences teaching, I want to learn from you all too. So any comments or questions? I'm going to try to practice some reflective silence right now, or give you some time to process, or maybe this is the termination silence, maybe. Yeah.
One of the things that you had mentioned, it's kind of struck a nerve with me, not a nerve in a bad way, but one of my graduates, so my graduate degree is in higher education, with a specific emphasis on governance and administrative things. And so most of the graduate students in my class, this class that I was in, they were either in like student affairs at different universities, or maybe two-year universities. Some of them were administrative, but none of them, the majority of them, weren't faculty or teaching. And so this class specifically was on the organization of higher education and the hierarchies and things, and getting the full mindset. And so he knew, based on our positions that he had gotten to learn about us, that we didn't have our mind wrapped around the faculty mindset. We were all assuming things from an administrative or very non-faculty perspective. And so he pitted us against each other in a healthy competition. So we had, and it took me about a year to fully think of things from a different perspective, because I had so many years of thinking from an administrative perspective, like as in daily administrative tasks, and not in a faculty role. And it has been the most valuable thing that I've gathered from my master's program, because it's a different thought process. So forcing us out of our comfort zone, out of our normal way of thinking, and debating with each other and arguing on the point on behalf of a faculty perspective was very different for me. But it was the most meaningful, and it's impacted what I do now. I work with faculty all the time.
Wow,
So
thanks for sharing that, and what a powerful experience.
It kind of hit
too,
me when
like,
you talked about that. So
thanks for sharing that. How that's really powerful, right? To try to try to really get that like empathetic kind of like understanding, like, because it's a shift.
Yeah.
Like,
it was challenging, really challenging.
Yeah.
So we also have some comments in, can you see the comments?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, let's see. Just reading through some of the comments here. Great, thank you so much. I saw some comments here about I appreciate the information on the use of silence. So this is Linda, thank you. Linda, I have opportunities to utilize it Great. That's wonderful. Yeah, because silence, it kind of goes with pausing, and pacing and right. I wonder too if we model that, too for students that, hey, like we're like comfortable with this, this is okay, like I can wait 3 seconds, like what's 3 seconds? I'm able to do that. I'm okay with this. Maybe students then will feel maybe they might feel more comfortable. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't see any more, or maybe
Yeah,
if,
no, there's no.
is there more? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you. Any last comments or questions? I want to make sure. I just appreciate all of you taking time to be here and just to listen. So thanks so much. I wish you the best. And take care, everybody.
This information will also be uploaded to the recording will be on the YouTube channel this afternoon. And then once Dr. Hughes finalizes his references and things, I will also send out the PowerPoint presentation, so you'll have access to his references.
Yes, that's right. Thank you so much. Right, those references are within the text too, so they're in text. But yeah, please let me know, and I'm happy to send those references to you, and those will be included also in the presentation. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.